Welcome to Everyday Theology, an ecumenical space for students to discuss matters of faith and theology.
I'm your host, Connor Grubbs.
I am your co-host, Ryan Mock.
And I'm your co-host, Johnny Grubbs.
And I'm Mac.
Hi, Mac.
Hello, Mac.
Hello, Mac.
Mac, you actually had a topic you were going to share with us.
I did have a topic. Yeah. So is this referring to the Orlando place?
It sure is.
Oh yeah, baby. So there was, rest in peace. There was this place in Orlando. It was called the Holy Land Experience.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. The Holy Land Experience was this, I don't even know if I'd call it an amusement park fully, because the sole aim of it wasn't, I don't think, it wasn't like rides or anything like that. It was more educational, but it was entertaining. And it was like a Christian theme park. One of the few that actually exist, and one of the only ones that was legitimately like not borderline sketchy, like out in the middle of nowhere. Like it was a legitimate run business. And I went there a handful of times with my family recently. It closed back, I believe, in 2021 after like the pandemic started. And I just saw an article today that it actually was demolished completely. And I don't know, it just kind of made me sad. It made me sad.
So, well, that's interesting, though, because I want to hear your thoughts about this, because I read about it, and I read about like what the experience was. I also read about that it was sort of like, I forget which television network, but it was sort of like the brainchild of somebody at a television network, and they had a friend. And so this television network was bankrolling Holy Land at a loss just because they believed in it so much. But, you know, that can only happen for so long. I mean, was it enjoyable, like, when you went?
Yeah, it was pretty enjoyable. Now, we went with, like, my younger sister and a handful of my younger cousins. I could tell it went a little bit over some of their heads. Mm-hmm. But I think if you were mature enough to understand, like one of my favorite ones was the show was called, because there were like, basically the whole park was shows, right? And there were like different time slots for each of the shows. And what was kind of funny is it was very, despite it being like this professional business, it was ragtag. And so the actors would actually leave one show and go to a different show and play a different character.
Oh, wow.
Some of them, like the guy that played Jesus basically floated around and played Jesus. And like there was a guy that played Moses who played like any of the burly dudes. But they had like their set actors. But like my favorite show was called there were a couple, but one of the best was called the Wilderness Tabernacle, and it was all about the tabernacle during like the Exodus, and it was like them carrying the ark, and like they had this cool effect where like the ark like shot smoke up in the air. I don't know, it was pretty cool to me, and it was like a lot of the history of like the Levites and all of this stuff. So I found it really interesting. There was a great show if you went around either Christmas or Easter that was topical. There was like a resurrection theme show for Easter, and made my mom cry, but that's not saying much because she cries at all the shows. But it was fun. I could see why it maybe wasn't like the biggest pull, especially when you have like Disney and Universal, these very like ride-centric thrill places. It was much more of an educational experience. They even had, like I was telling Ryan and Connor before the show, they had like a 1/16th scale of Jerusalem, like a giant map, like 3D map. It was actually pretty neat to see it, but, you know, again, we're kind of nerds about this, and I feel like if I was like a little kid there, I would get kind of bored.
Well, and see, that's the other thing. I regret not having visited it because I wanted to see the biblical accuracy of it. Because to bring the theology into it, what I've discovered over the past 5 to 7 years is that many like popular study Bibles that were like in Lifeways, for example, when the storefront of Lifeway was a big deal, a lot of them contain historical inaccuracies that fit with specific denominational theologies. things like when the Torah was actually written versus what most popular study Bibles of the early 2000s say it was written in, and how first century Jewish life was compared to what scholars say that it actually was. And so I just have to be curious, like, how accurate was it, or was it like evangelical perfect picture, like what we kind of want it to be, sort of scholarship?
Yeah, and it sounds similar to like the Ark Encounter to me in the sense that it's like an educational experience that really only appeals to a Christian audience. The thing that I'll say I would have been more willing to give it a chance than the Ark Encounter is the Ark Encounter has a clear agenda of teaching creationism, whereas this is like, the life and times of Jesus. Like, that's an interesting topic,
Right.
And that doesn't have to have propaganda attached to it. So, but I also agree, it's like, how accurate was it? And hearing that they had like Moses and other people, I thought it was just like New Testament times that it was covering.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing that I discovered too, because I mostly thought it was going to be like Christ-centric, like New Testament, but they had several shows that were Old Testament themed, which I found pretty interesting. I can't speak as to the accuracy of it fully, because also I like had my brain switched to like fun mode,
Sure,
even though it
yeah.
really was like an educational thing. I was just trying to like, because it's like a musical, and they have like little. They might even have had acrobatics. I can't remember, but it's predominantly like, to teach. They had some neat, like they had a part of it where I believe it's like Pilate where he's condemning Christ, and they have like a whole thing play out with Barabbas, and they're all shouting. Like it feels like you're there, and the set pieces were probably the coolest part. They're really big and very showy. But yeah, I suppose if I were like not a Christian, I would have no reason to go. Like, there's no like rides. It's all like learning stuff.
I feel like the only reason why an atheist would go to the Holy Land experience is to make fun of it.
Yeah, and there are, if you look it up on YouTube, there are like people kind of poking fun at it. And you can also find some highlights of the shows, so I might recommend you check those out. But it was cool. I got to meet and greet Jesus, so that was kind of fun. It
Yeah,
was pretty
see,
chill.
that's another awkward
weird.
thing.
and that's where I like. I guess my question is, what's the ultimate purpose, right? Because atheists, they'll come to make fun of it. Christians will go, but they may not even be getting that accurate of an education, and there's better ways to get educated. It's like you said, probably most people that are there, they're kind of in fun mode. Yeah, maybe they learn a couple things, but like they're just there to have a good time. So like, what purpose does it really fulfill other than to apparently not make the owners money?
I have to be a little bit cynical here. I'm going to get in my cynical mode here. One of the things I haven't appreciated about recent church history is this desire to prove that, like, if we enter into a sector, then everybody is going to love us and we're going to be successful, and like, I guess that's worked in Christian films, but I just remember like Lifeway. They're like, okay, everybody has retail stores. The retail stores at the time were doing really well. It was before online took off. We need to have a retail store, right? And it ultimately didn't survive. Everybody has a theme park in Orlando. Okay, so we're going to have a theme park in Orlando. We're going to show them that Christians can have a space in all these spaces. And while it's good, you could argue, to integrate into the culture, it's also bad just to assume that because everybody else is doing it, we need to be a part of it in the same way that they are. We are the church. We are supposed to stand outside of and above that. So that might be an elitist view. I don't know, but I just feel like it's not.
Yeah, Johnny is such an elitist.
I'm not trying to be, but I'm just like, I don't understand why we feel the need to try to pretend to be something that we're not most of the time. And I'm not saying that these things, Lifeway or the Holy Land, is a direct example of that, but it feels like that.
So the moral of the story is rip in peace, Holy Land.
Rip in peace,
Orlando.
Holy Land.
And I'm sorry for your memories that you'll never get back.
Rip in peace, Holy Land. I mean, the Holy Land is still there.
Holy Land, Orlando,
Yeah,
specifically.
Honestly,
the park,
it's
not the
okay
actual Holy Land.
because when we went, we had a 50-50 shot that we might have been going to like Epcot, and then we found out we were going to the Holy Land, and my sister was like, "Oh, are you serious?" Just,
Yeah, if I found out that we were going to the Holy Land Experience instead of Epcot, I'd probably be sad as well.
And
Yeah.
apparently most Christians agree with you because
Yeah.
it didn't make
because
it.
it didn't survive.
Ouch. I guess the Holy Land Experience is where you go like on your off day, like you didn't
Yeah.
get another ticket to Disney.
I will say it was cheap. Just on a business perspective, it was so large and there was so much dead space. Like it kind of felt like those creepy malls where they're like there's nothing there. I think if they had downscaled it, made it more of like a Bible museum, it might have fared better. But
You know,
like,
Mac, I
theme
gotta be
park
honest,
draws kids.
The
and
further we
kids
get
don't
into
go.
this conversation, the worse job you're doing at selling it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Holy Land Experience, I'm sorry.
But I'm glad that you enjoyed it. So rip in peace, Holy Land Experience, Orlando.
Rip.
Listen, did you go to the Holy Land Experience, viewer? What did you think? Was it how? Maybe you should comment or like or the subscribe or something. Goodbye.